I apologize if I have some errors. English is not my first language, and this might be a long post. Sorry. For context, I am now 26, and I met my stalker at 14 to 15 years old. So when I was 14, I decided to take ballroom dance classes. That was kind of normal for teenagers in my generation in my country. There you had to change partners each song, so every girl would dance with every boy. In my group that consisted of mostly teens between 14 and 17, there was a really tall dude named Philip. We had a nice chat the times we danced, but he seemed weird, and because I was young and naive, and that's how I normally made friends, I told him where I lived when he asked me. So the stalking began. At that time, I did not realize that it was stalking. I just thought he had a lot of time and that it was annoying. Philip would ride on his bike from his home. He lived one town over, to my house and ask if I wanted to spend time outside with him and play. After doing that a few times, I asked my parents to tell him that I was not home when he would come over. Both my parents and I were very oblivious about his actions for a very long time. At one point in time, the stalking ended for a few weeks, and Philip also did not come to dance classes. At that time, I became part of a friend group of a boy I fancied. For some months, he had a girlfriend, but they split soon after and I became his girlfriend. Unfortunately, Philip was also friends with the best friend of my boyfriend, so he was also part of the group. They told me Philip was in a mental hospital. In the span of his stalking, Philip was in a mental hospital multiple times, and every time he was, I was glad because then I had some peace. When I was 16, my family and I had to move because our landlady had thrown us out. She wanted to live in the property herself, so we moved one town over. We started living 2 streets apart from my stalker, and every time Philip was out of the hospital, he would be at my house. It was not as often, but still. At my father's birthday, he rang again, and because my family had guests, they told me to open the door, and there he was, looming over me like a dark, menacing shadow man. I told him to leave, and I tried to close the door, but he blocked it. So I was standing there, afraid, asking him to leave. At one time, I even ran inside to get my dad to send him away, but my dad said, "He is your friend, so it's your problem." So I went back to the door and I begged and pleaded that Philip please leave. At one point, he was kneeling and sitting in my doorway. After almost 2 hours, he finally left, and at that point, it was obvious for me. Finally, I had realized what type of behavior it was. He was a stalker and he was fixated on me. The next day, I sat down with my parents and told them that I was afraid of Philip, and my dad also apologized to me for putting me in that situation and not helping. The next time Philip came to my house, my dad was there and told him that I do not want any contact with him, so he left. After a few more incidents like that, he stopped showing up at my door and I thought we got rid of my stalker. But every time I started to live happily, starting to forget my fear of him, a letter, an email, or a gift showed up and would send me back into my fears. At 20, I was out of school, and to pass the year, I had to wait to start my job. I worked in a grade school in a voluntary after-school care club for grade schoolers. After a month or two, my mom woke me up in the morning and told me to get dressed because she had called the cops. Apparently, Philip was again every morning at our door and asked for me, and my parents didn't tell me so I wouldn't get scared again. Finally, after the cops told Philip 3 times to leave, and he ignored them, they arrested him and he screamed and screamed my name, and that he was burning for me, and that the cops heard him. My parents and I were standing in the kitchen listening. The situation was just so absurd and so much for me that I started laughing actually. We filed a report at the police for stalking and trespassing, but the officers said that they could not do anything because he hadn't hurt me physically. We tried to get a restraining order, but it didn't go through. A week later, Philip had sneaked into our garden, and like in a movie, he threw rocks at my window. Throwing rocks at a girl's window is not romantic, it's creepy. Idiotically, I opened the window, but did not see anything until it clicked, and I ran downstairs and told my dad that my stalker was in the garden. Philip escaped. A week after that, I was in the kitchen cooking when Philip rang the doorbell again, and because we have no way of seeing who was at the door, I opened it. There he was again telling me that he missed me and saying that he had peeked through the blinds of the windows in the living room the past week to see if I was there. My parents were not home. If they had been, I would have run, But like this, I had to swallow my fear and stand in the doorway, listening to Philip talking to my boyfriend. A different boyfriend came. I had sent him an SOS SMS, and he was on his way. After my boyfriend arrived, he told Philip to leave, and he did. Philip mentioned in passing that he also now has a girlfriend. After that, I didn't see him for a long time. A friend told me that he was taken by the men in white coats because he had believed that his mom was possessed by the devil. I was glad. It wasn't until 2 years later when I got a letter from court. I was a witness and told to attend in a case of assault of Philip. Apparently, after coming out of the mental hospital, he had a big fight with his girlfriend, and because she was scared, she played dead. Philip called an ambulance, and the police finally had something against him. After the hearing, he was admitted again to a mental hospital, and I finally got a restraining order. And he was ordered to stay at least 30 meters away from our property. I was so glad. The restraining order also implied that if he broke any of the requirements, he would go to jail. So, it was over. 2 years ago, I also moved out of my parents' house. I am posting this only now because I believe I'm seeing him again. But it can't be. He doesn't know where I live, and he also hasn't shown up at my parents' house. But I believe I have seen him when I leave the house. I just need reassurance that it's not him again and that I'm safe at my home. Update. So I installed a camera, and my neighbors also told me that there works a man that looks quite similar to Philip at the senior living center the street over. So for now I think I'm safe. I believe I saw that person and not Philip. Thanks so much for all of your advice, by the way. I'm very grateful. I grew up in an extremely rural Midwestern state. My family lived in the country between two small towns. I had attended school in both small towns and knew most of the families in the area, either by face or by last name. One night, it was about 10 or 11 and I was leaving a high school basketball game in Town A. I was around 15 and driving on my school permit past curfew. I had borrowed my uncle's car, an early 90s Toyota, with a leak in the gas tank that caused me to run out of gas before I made it more than 5 or 6 miles out of town, and I had about 7 left to go. I was on a long stretch of road that served as a shortcut between 2 main highways in the aforementioned towns and wasn't heavily traveled. There were a few houses, but they were stretched far apart, and at the time, as well as to this day, cell phone reception was very spotty. I waited a while, and finally a nice, newer red truck with an extended cab, a toolbox in the back, and a construction company logo on the side pulled up. It was a Friday or Saturday night, and there was a man inside with a woman and 2 girls. He offered me his phone. I remember noticing it was a track phone, which my friends and I at the time refers to as a crack phone, because you can't trace the owners and they are frequently used by drug addicts. They're also used by a lot of people who can't use a standard phone plan though, but the family was driving a really nice vehicle, and they seemed super clean cut, so it struck me as weird. The phone got no reception. I tried calling my parents a few times and finally gave up. The truck had been headed away from Town B towards Town A, where I had just come from, so when they offered me a ride, I thought nothing of it. I had a gas can in the trunk, and all of my friends lived in Town A, so I figured they could drop me off at the gas station on their way to their destination, and I could find a ride back with somebody I knew. When I got in the car, I was caught off guard by the way the woman, who I assumed was his wife, and the 2 girls, who I assumed were their children, were dressed. Conservative families, even Amish and Mennonites, aren't even uncommon where I'm from. But for the man being otherwise modern, wearing jeans, driving a sort of flashy truck, and owning a cell phone, females' clothing surprised me. They all wore long, heavy skirts with button-up blouses and thin bonnets on their head. One of the girls seemed to have a disability and made grunting noises every so often. Other than her noises, the women were completely silent. Everything seemed fine to me until the man driving turned around and started driving the opposite way of the direction he had been driving. The closest town the other way was still 15 or more miles, and it seemed very out of the way. Out of politeness, I reminded him that I had come from Town A, knew everybody there and could find a ride home. It was late, and I figured he needed to get his family where they were going. That's when he told me that he was from Town B, that he had a full gas can waiting at his house, that he would take me there and bring me back to my car to fill it up. Still trying to be polite, I told him it was unnecessary and my house was on the way to Town B, just a few miles away, and he could drop me off there. He didn't reply. I started to feel like something was off. I'm from an area where people go out of their way to help others, yes, but it seems like too much. I had insisted numerous times that he didn't have to drive nearly 30 miles out of his way to get me gas. He could simply drop me off on his way to his destination, or if he wanted to make sure I made it home fine, he could drop me off at home. In my uneasiness, I started making small talk. I asked him his name, and his last name was unfamiliar to me, which was surprising but not totally unbelievable. Coming from a town of around 3,000 people, where I had spent the first decade of my life and where both of my parents still worked, I remember wishing that I had paid attention to the construction company name on the side of the truck, since most companies in my area were named after a family. As we got closer to the turnoff to my house, I started to get more frantic. I realized that these people, who didn't even seem overly friendly, were insisting that we drive completely out of the way, late at night in a rural community, to fix a fairly commonplace mishap. I had no idea who they were. I had never seen them before. I had no cell phone reception, and their cell phone was undetectable. Even if it wasn't what they were trying to do, making me disappear would be a pretty easy task. I started kind of shrieking that they just dropped me off at my house, but nobody in the car seemed like they heard me. Finally, in a bit of a panic, I screamed at the top of my voice, "This is my turn. Take me home. Please take me home right now." Finally, for the first time, the wife spoke up, yelling at the man angrily and somewhat annoyed, "Just take her home." Outside of the girl's grunting, the car fell silent. He swerved angrily onto my road, pulled into my driveway, let me out, and then reversed out of the driveway so fast that the tires spit gravel and I couldn't even see the license plate or name of the company through the dust. I ran inside and woke up my parents to tell them what happened. They just yelled at me because I was driving past curfew. I don't know for sure what the intentions were. Maybe they just wanted to help, but I felt really uneasy the whole time. Not as scary as some stuff on here, but that's my experience. So, in the summers of '08 and '09, I was a lifeguard at a local private swimming pool. I was known for being a really nice, laid-back kid. I would give some leeway for those who liked a small running start to dive into the deep end and let people hold others on their shoulders and things like that. Even though I was laid back most of the time, I still had to crack the whip every now and then. A lot of kids would curse loudly or talk about things that just shouldn't be said in a family environment. I had a lot of friends who went to the pool, most of them being girls. I remember one day when a friend came up to me during a break and told me a kid was being really weird and saying gross things to her. I told her if it happens again to let me know. A few minutes after the break ends, I'm in my chair and find her on the shallower side of the pool with some of our other friends. I then notice a guy a few years older than us, maybe mid-20s, 6'2", wade up to her and our friends. He says something I couldn't make out, sees the girl squirm and make uncomfortable faces, and this guy starts laughing. My friend Megan then comes swimming over to me, saying he did it again. I tell her that I saw and immediately blow my whistle. Now, I'm sure all of you can remember swimming at a pool and hearing the lifeguards whistle and how quiet it gets when everybody turns to look at them. That's what happened. I look at him and shout, "Hey." I realized I didn't know his name. I asked Megan if she knew. It was Dylan. So again I shout, "Hey Dylan, come here." I tell Megan to leave as he swims over. By this time the people realized it had nothing to do with them and went back to their own thing. When he gets to me, I lean down and tell him that I know he's been saying inappropriate things to my friends and he needs to stop or I will kick him out. He laughs it off, saying it's no big deal and that he was only messing around. I correct him, saying it's actually a very big deal and he should not do it anymore. He agrees and I let him go. A few hours later, the pool is getting ready to close. I hear a scream and look to see Megan with her jaw dropped and swimming away from Dylan very fast with a look of utter shock on her face. Then another friend, Elizabeth, does the same thing, and again, Noelle does it too. All the while, Dylan is laughing his ass off. I tried getting their attention, but without even looking at me or talking, my friends leave the pool and walk to the sound, which is literally a football field away. Dylan right behind them. I wanted to go after them, but I needed to close the pool up. After doing so in a very fast and sloppy manner, I head over there as fast as possible to find my friends yelling at Dylan to leave them alone. A few other patrons from the pool headed over to the sound for some extra swimming, so I know they were watching this all go down. It was not a quiet scene. I demanded to know what was going on, and Noelle told me that when the pool was getting ready to close up, Dylan went around and started poking his toes and fingers into their butts. It wasn't just them either. He had done it to several girls while there. They just didn't bother to do anything about it. I was mad, not only because he was doing it to my friends, but also because I, as a lifeguard, should have seen this as it happened and stopped it. I was fuming, screaming at this guy about why he would do such a thing. He's still laughing about it, tells me to calm down. I tell him to F off right now before I put his ass to the sand. Keep in mind that he was 6'2" and I'm probably only 5'8". When I said this, he went from laughing to being quite serious. He said something along the lines of, "You have no idea what I'd do to you, kid, or what I'd do to those girls if given the chance." Nope. I wasn't having it. He went way too far with that one. Still being in my lifeguard attire, I take my whistle off and hand it to Elizabeth. Take my flip-flops off and kick them to the side. Pull my sunglasses off my shirt collar and set them with Elizabeth. I looked him in the eyes while putting my fists up and said I wasn't giving him the chance. I started walking towards him when I see him finally realize that I wasn't messing around. He quickly puts his fists up, and as I'm almost in range, he throws an early punch, missing me by a few inches. Take the opportunity, rush in, and throw a quick 1-2, and hit him at the chin/nose level, knocking him back a few steps. I shoot in for a takedown, grab him, pick him up onto my right shoulder, and slam him down into the sand, driving my shoulder into his stomach on impact. I hear him wheezing and gasping for air a little bit, with blood coming out of his nose. I stand up and look at him. I tell him if I ever see him at my pool again, I'll make it worse. By this time, there is a small crowd of people, most of who were from the pool, watching, including my friends. I turn to them and tell them let's go. I gave them all a ride back to their houses and told them if they ever see him again, to find the closest adult and stay near them and keep 911 ready to call. We never see him again though. Megan told me later on that she read in the paper about a guy named Dylan who was being charged with rape. She didn't recognize that last name, but then again, we never learned his. Update. It's become quite apparent that a lot of you think this story is made up. I seriously have no idea what would make you people think this. Is it the fact that it ended with me actually doing something to the person, instead of running away and calling the cops? A lot of you are also saying that I should have called the police because of the assault. And you know what? You're right. I should have. But being a 16-year-old kid, I didn't think like that. I was thinking more about kicking this guy's ass to get my friends away from him. If it were today, I still would have kicked his ass, just called the cops after. And there is really no reason for you guys to doubt my story. If you do, you might as well start calling everybody else who posts in this sub a liar. This happened this past Saturday at my bachelorette party. The theme of my party was boats and hoes, and took place on a lake surrounded by mansions. One of my best friends lives there. The day started off awesome. I was surrounded by a plethora of paper, chocolate, light up, and inflatable penises. We spent the day on the lake hooting and hollering and making all the other boaters laugh with our 6-foot blow-up man poles. This is a really nice lake community, but they also like to party, so they are all in good spirits about the explicit nature of our voyage. Anywho, we get back to shore happy that we made our presence known to the entire lake. The annual community party is in a few hours, so we get ready and shine up the old lads for another show. We head over to the party on the boat, pontoon, and try to bank the boat at the park where the party is. A couple of times until we're sure it's pulled up far enough to not float away, which is relevant for later. So we roll in. The life of this snooze fest. And the desperate housewives and their bold drunk husbands are all about the D. It's a good time. I'm working on an awesome guitar solo when I smell someone behind me. Cigarettes and booze and BO and I want to vomit. Creep is in a pitted out gray t-shirt and black basketball shorts. Probably mid-40s and definitely not a member of this upper class community. So, you like dicks, huh? I think my friend Willie is pretty funny. Yes. Monotone, by the way. No eye contact or smiles. I start to walk away. I bet you like a lot of it, don't you? He said. I give him a what the heck look. No. Are you gonna use that on yourself later? I walk away quickly and don't look back. I find my girlfriends and tell them to be on creep alert. Next thing I know, he approaches my sister and asks her the same questions. She tells me. We tell the gang and we are all on high alert. Then he approaches my soon-to-be sister-in-law. So how old is the bride? Sister-in-law gives him the, are you freaking kidding me? Look, and my friend Jay comes to the rescue. None of your business. I brought my friends here to have a good time and you're creeping us out, so leave us alone. He then scurries away into the shadows. Not long after, we see him and his friend watching us on the dance floor. We keep an eye on him. Luckily, the band are on their last song. It's going on 2 a.m. and we regroup around the picnic table for a while. Creep is nowhere in sight. When we are ready to call it a night, we walk back to our boat. We are confused because we can't find it until we notice that it's floating away. Somebody had minutes before pushed the boat offshore. A couple of the girls jump in after it, and that's when we see their boat off a ways with all of their lights out watching us. We officially went from feeling annoyed to feeling threatened. The girls get the boat back to us and we all got on. The dark boat starts driving away down the lake. Crap. We have to go that way to get to the lake house that we're staying at. We give them distance until we can no longer see their boat. They never turn their lights back on and head home. As we are docking in front of our lake house, we see that the boat is coming up behind us. They snuck away and had then followed us. Great. They know where we're staying now. Well, I'm feeling brave at this point, so I stand at the end of the dock as they coast slowly by. I'm staring them dead in the eyes. I see you weirdos. They're looking back at me the same exact way. Screw this. We run back inside, lock all the doors, and hope that we have no other encounters with these hillbilly Chernobyl creepy fricks. I know that jerking around with a bunch of dicks isn't exactly giving off the best vibes, but we are clearly having good-hearted fun with the community and not dressing slutty or being flirtatious or anything. I can still smell this weirdo. There always has to be someone to ruin the fun, huh? This story is a little different than the usual ones because it wasn't a stranger on the street or an insane ex situation. But the entire experience creeped me out, and since I liked reading the stories here, I figured I should submit my own. I'll put a line where the actual meeting of these people starts, as there was a bit of a lead up that made me a bit uncomfortable and confused from the get-go. About a week ago, I was looking through Craigslist job postings and typed in hostess. Filled out a handful for restaurants and bars, one that sounded like it was for an art gallery of some kind, and there was one for a gentleman's club. I actually had been reading an Ask Reddit thread about stories from women who worked at places like Hooters and had been thinking about how entertaining a job in a place like that could be. The ad said they were looking for hostesses, waitresses, and entertainers, and if interested to send a resume and a photo of yourself smiling. No nudity required. I sent a short email saying I was interested in the hostess position if it was still available. The ad was like 15 days old. Put my contact info in and attached my photo and resume. I had an email from the woman doing the hiring the next day. It looked a little bit strange. Maybe I'm nitpicky, but it just looked really unprofessional. There were misspellings, no punctuation, unless you count the completely random ellipses, up to 4 spaces in between words, but not even consistently, and it said to just come to the club whenever. I replied saying I could come in to talk with her on Monday at 10 a.m. and to let me know if that was a convenient time for her. she said. Sounds great, and that was it. On Monday, I go to the club. It's giant, and there's a large screen over their front entrance displaying those generic cam girl pictures and things like caution, nudity inside, and VIP rooms. I was actually relieved that it was a big place. At least it wasn't some hole in the wall. Go to step inside and the door was locked. Then I look at the pink painted letters and see it's open from late afternoon to 2:30 a.m. I figured that about the actual club portion, but I thought there'd be an office in back or something since this is where she told me to go. I knocked a few times and peer inside. The lights are off. Everything is locked up and put away. I realized then that I never got her number, so I can't email her from there. I get home and send an email letting her know I showed up for my interview and that nobody was there. Then I get this reply. Oh no, I'm so sorry. We have an office next to the club. Please come back. She had accidentally told me to go to the wrong place. It's almost an hour away and I didn't have time to go all the way back a second time that day. I decide I'll try again tomorrow. So I'm back at the club the next day. I walk along the edge of the building past the actual area, and there's just flat concrete for several feet. Then at the end, I see a large open doorway shape. No door, but there's a hands railing and plain concrete stairs leading up. I actually took my mace out of my purse and put it in the right hand pocket of my coat. I know, a bit paranoid. I head up and come to a bright little office area with glass doors. The doors don't say anything to indicate they're affiliated with the club. There's no logo or matching pink color like the club door. I go in and see a man sitting behind a small front desk. I ask if I'm in the right place to talk to the woman I'd been emailing. He started to say yes and stood up, and my first thought was this guy just masturbating before I walked in? His pants are up properly on the sides and in the back, but the front is tugged down to the bottom of his crotch and all wrinkled. The button is only half looped into the hole, and the zipper is completely down, with part of his button-up shirt sticking partially out of the opening. He gestures to a small office behind him and sits down again. Honestly, I tried to look at his screen as I walked behind him to see if there was porn on his computer. Couldn't see it though. I was at once disappointed and relieved. I get into the office and there's a bleach blonde woman in her 60s sitting behind the desk. I introduce myself and apologize for the mistake the previous day. From the moment I started talking to her, it felt weird. Her effect was very strange. Sometimes it seemed like she clicked off and rebooted and would just completely change what she was talking about. She just felt creepy. Like when somebody doesn't say or do anything to you, but something about them gives you a really bad feeling. She hands me a piece of paper to fill out with contact information and some basic questions. We chat for a moment as I fill it out. Then she suddenly starts talking in a quiet, concerned voice and says, "Do you know it's a strip club?" What? Let's say I was so innocent-minded that I had no idea what gentleman's club meant. Why would I still not know after seeing the giant screen displaying half-naked women? I say yes, and then her voice changes back, and she started complimenting my shoes and talking about other things again. She asks me where I'm living since I just recently moved here. I tell her and she recognizes the area. Talks about how nice it is and asks me if it's hard getting all the way out here. No, I say. It's about 40 to 50 minutes by bus. Not too bad at all. She asks me for my social security card and I realize I forgot it. I let her know I have one. It's just packed in a folder with all of my important documents at home. She then asks, "Where is it though?" I reply again, "At my home." "What do you mean home though?" I get confused. We had just been talking about where I'm living not even 30 seconds ago, so it's not as if she doesn't know where my home is. All that comes out of my mouth is, "It's where I live." The instant I get out live, she reboots and starts talking about giving me a tour of the club. As we walk around the dim club, she's showing me stages, soundproof VIP rooms, etc. I realize she's talking to me as if I'm applying to be a dancer. So I start asking specifically about the hostess job. She's ignoring me and giving me uninterested answers. "So, is there an area in front I'd be at most of the night as a hostess?" "Well, yeah, it's down over there," waving her hands in the general direction, and this is the main stage. The tour finishes up and we're back in the office. There are photos all over her walls of girls who look barely 18, smiling with their friends, and holding up their paperwork they just signed to start working as strippers. I ask another question about the hostess job and finally get, well, I don't know if we have one of those. Then she says they do, but she doesn't know what's going on with the current hostess, and that she is talking about switching to dancing. Most girls do, she says and looks at me. She's going to try to shove me into stripping no matter what I sign up for. Confirmed. Then she asks if I'd like to come in the next night as a waitress because they make a lot of money. I mean, the dancers make more, but waitresses get good tips. No, I'm officially done here. I say I have some more interviews coming up and ask if she'd be alright with me emailing her on Monday if I'm still interested and available. She puts her head down and her voice becomes quiet and pouty. Oh, she says. Okay. I'm staring at her, trying to not make a face and thinking, is this real life? Are you seriously pouting because I hostess zoned you and won't get naked in your creepy club? She looks up and says in a different tone, well, honey, I think you're really cute. You would do really well here. She stretches out the last words. Screw this. I stand up and thank her for meeting with me. She stays seated at her desk as I reach over to shake her hand and then I leave. Bit of an epilogue. I told my housemate about the whole thing, and at one point, when I mentioned with emails and the woman's name, she said, wait, I think I applied there before when I first got out here. I remember talking with someone who sent emails like that, and the whole interaction felt weird somehow. Did you interview with her? No, that's the thing, I never got one. It was so hard trying to nail down a time with her to go do that. Then she started emailing me things that seemed more about dancing than waitressing or hostessing. I let her know that I absolutely was not interested in eventually dancing, but I was completely comfortable with having one of the other positions and asked if that was going to be an issue. I got a reply that I felt very strange and amounted to, well then, you shouldn't even bother coming in. So, creepy strip club madam, let's not meet again. And to your receptionist, check your zipper, man. When I was accepted into a college that was far from my hometown, I didn't really know anyone else who lived there. The college I went to didn't have dorms, but they did have apartments that they suggested students live in due to the proximity to the college, and I'm sure they got a kickback for people who signed up and said they heard about the apartment complex through the college. I was pretty broke at that point, plus I wanted to meet some new people right away, so I chose my apartment largely due to a roommate matching service they had. Basically, you had to fill out a questionnaire about your demographics and hobbies or interests, and the service would match you with roommates that are compatible with you. Mind you, I chose this particular apartment despite the 1-star reviews I saw across the board online. I mean, they were under new management and it was only a year lease. Couldn't be that bad. I was matched with another guy in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment. I was excited to move in and meet him. I moved in a few days after the lease started, probably about 3 weeks before school did, and already began regretting my decision. The apartment was crap and smelled like mold and old cigarettes. In fact, there was a used ashtray on the coffee table when I first got there. When they said it was furnished, I didn't expect it to be exactly like home. My new roommate didn't show up for about a week. When he finally did, I found out that he was about 35 and didn't even go to my school. He was pretty scruffy and smelled like old cigarettes and BO. Eventually, I found out that he used to be homeless and took out student loans to afford the application fee and first few months' rent, but he never enrolled in classes. After the first few months, he stopped paying rent, and it took about 6 months for the property to finally evict him. In the state I lived in, you had to evict judicially, and the courts were bogged down, so it took a little while. While he lived in my apartment, he never changed his clothes. He always wore the same beat-up looking camel pants and stained dirty wife beater. I even offered him some clothes I was getting rid of that would have fit him fine. He was content though, so whatever. He would also have a lot of his old roommates from when he lived at homeless shelters over. It wouldn't be uncommon for me to come home to a random person doing laundry, even when my roommate wasn't home. When I would have a guy over to hang out in my room, He would watch us walk from the front door to my room through a crack in his door just wide enough for me to see the creepiest look on his face. Literally every time. Needless to say, he gave me the creeps. A few months after school started and after I was noticing his creepy behavior more and more, I was in my room asleep with the guy that I was talking to at the time. Actually still my boyfriend now. When I heard a knock on my bedroom door. I look at the clock and it's about 3 in the morning. I get up to go see what whoever it was wanted and open my door to a random dirty and old naked guy. He said that he's a friend of my roommate and thought my roommate was in my room with me. I flipped the heck out. Obviously, my roommate isn't in my room with me. In order to get into my apartment, my roommate would have had to let him in, and the apartment isn't very big, so it wasn't like my roommate could have gone somewhere else, so his friends wouldn't know where he was. He was either in the living room or in his room. I throw this dude out, him being butt-ass naked, and let myself into my roommate's room. This is the first time I've been in there, mainly because I have no reason to associate with him, and he's sitting in the corner doing absolutely nothing with his lights off, almost as if he were waiting for me to come in there. I ask him about everything that just happened and he tries to play dumb like he didn't even know the guy. Somebody had to let him in and it wasn't me. I drop it, begrudgingly, because the eviction notices are piling up on his door. I figure it's just a matter of time until he's gone. In the meantime, I saw the naked dude randomly in the apartment, doing laundry a handful of times when I would get home from class. Finally, my roommate is evicted, and I think I'm done with that, and maybe we'll get another roommate that is actually my age or cool. A few weeks go by that are more or less quiet. Then one day, I hear a knock at the front door during the day. When I answer it, I see the random naked dude standing there, thankfully clothed this time, with a trash bag full of what looks like disgusting laundry. He tells me that my roommate said it was cool if he came to use the washer and starts to walk forward like he owns the place. I step in front of him and tell him that his friend doesn't live there anymore and no, he can't use my washing machine. I close the door and lock it and go back to my room. About 20 minutes later, I keep hearing a random noise from my balcony. I lived on the 3rd floor, so I figured it was just a squirrel or a bird out there scratching around. I keep hearing the noise, so I decide to investigate, and I see the homeless guy trying his best to climb up to my balcony. I told him I was calling the cops, but obviously, by the time they got there, he's gone. That same day, I went to the property manager and asked what kind of roommate matching service works like that, and demanded to get out of my lease. After some heated discussion, I persuaded her that it was probably in her best interest to just let me leave. I found a nice 1-bedroom and never looked back. Prowler at the Window was not only my first post here, but it is also the very first time I've ever submitted anything I've written to the general public. I never thought of myself as being adept at writing, but I have always enjoyed it. Thanks so much for supporting comments and requests for more. I had no idea that anyone would like it. Strange as it was an honest experience. The bottom was a great source of experience. To be honest, it was probably a lot more sinister than I realized because I was young and naive. Having grown older, it isn't a place where I would want to raise a family in today's world. Back then, it was a more innocent time. My memories of the bottom are both sweet and sour, but it was familiar and it was home. Still, I got to see some pretty terrific and occasionally terrifying things when we lived there. I could tell any of several stories to you. There was the teenager who started lighting fires all over the place one summer, who got caught at the wrong house and nearly got beaten to death. There was the long-haired dude who would break into houses and steal food and panties. He was never caught. There was the kid whose family lived 4 houses down the road from me that shot his neighbor in the back of the head with a gun. 357. There was the swamp monster thing that killed a bunch of dogs and chickens. There was the snake that caught on a trout line that was confiscated by authorities. Then the kid who rode the school bus with me who apparently saw a UFO and was the subject of a television documentary. There were the guys who went noodling and pulled a body out of a hole instead of a fish. We discovered an old, long-forgotten slave cemetery after finding some holes dug in the ground and scattered bones. It was a different kind of community, to say the least. I'm happy to share these stories if anyone wants me to do so, though. This particular incident happened just after school had let out for the summer vacation. It would have been early to mid-June of 77 or 78, and I would have been 9 or 10 years old at this time. Of course it was raining. It was a steady but moderate downpour. My grandfather would have called it a toad floater. It got dark early because of the storm clouds, a dusky wet twilight at around 5 p.m. It was an even gloomier day because I was stuck inside the house. In those days, before cable television, we only got 3 channels on the TV, and at 5 p.m., the news was on all 3 channels. My mother was just beginning to start cooking supper. She placed a pot of red beans on the stove to cook after soaking them all day, and she was in the process of cutting up potatoes to fry when we heard the truck. Our property was bordered on the south side of FM 2797, which stopped in a dead end about a quarter mile past our house. At the southwest corner of our land was the entrance to Plaza Drive. This was the road that went down to the bottoms. At the northwest corner of our property, the road made a 90-degree turn and followed along our property line to the bottom. This 90-degree corner was the source of many hours of excitement. About once every 3 months, someone either entering or leaving the bottom would try to take that corner too fast and would end up either stuck in the field or, if I were lucky, sideways in the turn and would roll their car if they were going fast enough. Don't get me wrong, I didn't want to see people get hurt, but it was always great fun to watch the tow truck come out and roll the car back out into its wheels and then haul it off. The tow truck driver would normally pick us any of the larger objects that fell out of the car, but they were never diligent about it. I would go over to the corner after the tow truck was gone and look for whatever they'd missed or just not taken the time to retrieve. My main reason for this search was for change that may have fallen out. This meant an extra candy bar to split with my brother. Mom always made me share or a new Hot Wheel. There was something left behind. A shoe, a hairbrush, a baby bottle, etc. I also found a box of bullets. Another time I found a Hustler magazine that opened up a whole new world for me. So a car wreck at the corner was always a cause for excitement. On this particular night, the truck was going way too fast. We could hear it long before it was anywhere near the house. I watched down the road toward the bottom and could see the flashes of light from the headlights as they bounced up and down in the distance. My mother turned to me at this point and said, "Who is that?" We knew most of the cars or trucks by the sound of their engines, but somebody driving this fast was a rarity, especially in the rain. Plaza Drive was loose gravel over compacted clay and was slicker than snot whenever it got wet. After it was soaked through, it turned into a paste that sucked at your tires and left ruts. But the road had been built up over the years, so the water would run off of it before it had a chance to soak in. This resulted in a rounded road more than a flat road, which was fine when it was dry, but more difficult to navigate when wet. "I don't know who it is. It sure is loud," I replied with my nose pressed against the window. Then the lights got brighter and the truck came into view. It was a 68 or so Chevy short bed pickup that was jacked up with big mutter tires on it. It was a very bright red color with a blue driver's side door and a white tailgate. "It's Billy," I told Mom. She muttered under her breath about him killing someone one of these days. She was beating eggs into a cornbread mix extra vigorously, but kept on muttering. "He knows there are kids here." I told her that he was going too fast. By now, I had my nose and both hands pressed to the window. Billy was in front of our house, and there weren't any signs of him slowing. As he passed the house, I watched for brake lights, and sure enough, about 100 feet from the 90-degree turn, much too late to even slow down much, the tailgates lit up. As I watched, the lights lifted a little bit in the air as the front brakes brought the nose down. Then suddenly, those brake lights went about 10 feet into the air and then disappeared. Then I saw one of the headlights and then the brake lights again, rolling over each other in the rain. It finally came to a stop on one of the sides, but I couldn't tell which side. As I was watching and was taking all of this in, my mother half shouted, "What was that?" She'd heard the booms and crunches. She came running over to me, wiping her hands with a dish rag. She came up behind me and looked out the window, and as we both watched, the lower of the two taillights flickered and went out. Then I heard Mom trotting over to use the phone. She picked it up and listened for a moment before dialing. We shared a party line with two other families. One of the families had a teenager about 6 years older than me, whose ear was practically glued to the phone. It was seldom that Mom or Dad was able to use the phone without having to wait for her to finish talking and hang up. Mom was lucky this time and had an open line. Mom called the police and was telling them what happened and where to go. I was watching the truck. I couldn't really see anything but that one tail light and the headlight shining on the weeds in front of it. I was watching to see if somebody was going to crawl out, but never saw anyone. As I was watching the truck, my mom went to the closet to get a raincoat and an umbrella. She was shrugging into the raincoat and giving me instructions at the same time. I was not to leave the house, and I was to keep my brother from touching any of the hot items on the stove if he woke up. Mom started to leave and then said, "Flashlight. I need a flashlight," and went to the utility room at the back of the house to get one. I just turned back to the truck when the front door banged open and a woman half stumbled and half fell into the house. She was skinny with big you-know-what. That was all I noticed at first, being the curious, inquisitive young man that I was. To tell the truth, I didn't really know anything about that at the time, except that everyone at school always talked about them, so I figured it must be important. Then I saw the blood. Her whole head was covered in it. Her hair that I initially thought was brown was actually blonde, but bloody. It was a short, choppy type of cut, and I could see that one of her hoop earrings had been torn out of an ear, and it was bleeding. Her nose was fat and at an angle. Her lips were bleeding, and she had blood in her teeth. Her forehead had several small cuts and gashes that were all oozing. She had a cut under an eye that my dad would have called a rabbit. Her neck was bleeding too. She was wearing black pants and a light blue button shirt that had a frilly lace collar. Waitress uniform. I realized when I saw the name tag. It had one corner broken off and was hanging at an angle with blood staining her shirt behind it. One leg of the black pants was ripped from about mid-thigh down to below the knee, and I could see bits of a bloody leg. She had blue kicks that were the same color as her shirt, but the whole back of one was cut. There was blood there too. As I was taking all of this in, my mom came running up the hall wanting to know what happened. She saw the woman and said, "What? Look at you." She had the woman sit at the table and went into her doctor mode. She got a bowl of water and sat it on the table with a roll of paper towels and began mopping the blood off the woman's face. She was asking one question after the other, but never stopped long enough to let the woman talk. As she got up to get a glass of water for the woman, my father walked in from work. He started to ask about all the blood all over the door, and then saw the woman. Mom looked at him and told him that the police were coming. As Dad was talking to Mom, someone started beating on the door. It was Mr. Laird, who lived on the other side of the road from us, up from the corner. He said that he saw the accident, and by the time he got to the truck, it was empty. He wanted to know if there was anything he could do. The woman started crying and began telling us about how Billy had beat her. She said that he'd used the small end of a fishing rod and beat her until she bled. I hissed at this because I could relate. Just the summer before, I was riding my bike in front of our house and some kids drove by and yelled something at me. My response was to grab a rock and throw it at them. I was pretty handy with a rock, but the car was going too fast and I never had a chance. Worse though, my father saw what I'd done and came striding out to me. He asked me what I'd done and I told him that I hadn't done anything. Then he said that he saw me throw the rock. He thought I lied to him, but I meant that I hadn't done anything to make the kids yell at me. I had a white fiberglass whip antenna with an orange flag mounted on the back of my bike. It was kept in the holder with a screw that was long gone, but if I didn't jump a ramp or ride over anything too bumpy, it stayed in the holder. Before I could explain, Dad grabbed it and grabbed me by the upper arm and gave me 2 quick swats. I was wearing shorts and it stung like nothing I'd ever experienced before. Then he made me walk my bike back to the barn and put it away. I didn't need to be having fun on a bike if I was going to lie to him, so I knew all about how it felt to get a stripe or two. She told Dad that her name was Margaret, which I thought was strange because her name tag clearly said Molly on it. but I knew better than to chime in when adults were talking, so I didn't say anything. She said that she and Billy had been seeing each other off and on for the past 6 months or so. He'd picked her up after work that afternoon, and they'd gone back to his place to get high. He wanted to go get some more, but she wanted to go home and change first, and he got mad and went crazy and started slapping her around. She told us that she got mad and slapped him back, and that was when he punched her in the face. She said that it knocked her across the bed and out, into the hall, and she started to run out the door. But he was behind her and pushed her, and she fell into his coffee table. She told us that he came into the living room with the short end of the fishing rod and just started hitting her. I could see my dad getting mad because his jaw was tightening up. I looked at Mr. Laird, and he was practically shaking, his lips pressed together so hard that they turned white. He lost his wife 2 summers earlier in a boating accident and was left with a 14-year-old daughter and twin 8-year-olds. He was ready to murder. Margaret went on to say that she kicked him in the balls and tried to run out the door, but before she could get outside, he tackled her and they fell into the kitchen. He landed on the floor and she ended up on top of him. She told us that she tried to get up and grab the oven handle for support, but just popped open and she fell back on him again. But that's when she saw the iron skillet inside the oven. She said that she grabbed it and hit him with it in the head. And when he tried to fight back, she hit him again. She said that he bucked his hips and hit her in the ribs. And then she just started hitting him over and over again. He's probably dead. I hope he is. You could practically see the pity rolling off my mother's face. They talked for a few more minutes, and as my mother continued to clean the blood away, my father and Mr. Laird decided to go check on Billy to make sure he was still alive and not lying on the floor with what Mr. Laird called a broke head. As soon as they walked out the door, Margaret changed. At first, she wanted to get her jacket out of the truck, but my mom wouldn't let her leave. She told Margaret that it would be fine and that the police would be there any moment. Then Margaret said her purse was in the truck and she needed to get it. My mom started to tell her that it was okay, but Margaret insisted that her medicine was in the purse and that she needed to take it. My mom is as good as they get. She can be a little backward sometimes, but she's not an idiot. Suspicious now, she asked Margaret what medicine she needed. Margaret stalled. It was obvious that she was searching for a suitable answer. Suddenly, she looked up and actually had a half smile as she held up a single finger and said, "My inhaler. I need my inhaler." Then almost comically, she lost the smile and slumped in the chair and started breathing in a raspy manner. My mom is one of those old souls who looks for the best in any situation. The thought of lying to someone, especially in the time of a crisis, was beyond her, and for some odd reason, she never could believe that anyone would lie to her. Yes, I took advantage of that on more than one occasion. Hey, I was a kid, not a saint. My mom got this worried look on her face. She was obviously torn between leaving me and my brother alone with a strange woman and letting the woman suffer. She looked between Margaret and me, and my brother asleep on the sofa, and the window, and back to Margaret. By this time, Margaret was blowing like a racehorse. Between gasps of breath, she told my mom not to worry and that she'd be back in a minute. My mother and I watched as she got up and limped to the door, leaving tracks of blood from her cut foot. We watched out the window and she stumbled across our yard to the road and toward the truck. At that moment, the phone rang and I watched as Mom talked to the caller. From the tone of her voice, I knew it was my dad. She started to tell him about Margaret going back to the truck, but stopped when he started shouting. I could hear his voice through the tinny speaker all the way across the room. When I looked back at the truck, I couldn't see Margaret, but I did see the police arrived, and I said so to Mom. She was finishing the call with a lot of okays and nods of the head. When she hung up the phone, she went over and locked the door and told me to come away from the window. My father and Mr. Laird drove back into sight, but instead of pulling into our yard, they went to where the police were looking over the truck. It was pretty dark by now, and all I could see were the lights from my dad's car, lights from the police car, and that one taillight on Billy's truck. I could also see 2 flashlights shining all over the truck and then inside the truck, and then into the surrounding trees and bushes. I watched my father run up to the police, and I knew he was shouting because both of the flashlights whipped up and over to him. He was pointing back to his car. Then I watched the flashlights start bobbing up and down and back and forth as the policemen went running towards my dad's car. Then I saw the inside light come on and the flashlight beams shining on 2 men in the back seat. One of the policemen went back to the police car and sat inside for a minute, and then went back to my dad's car. Nothing else happened for a long time. Then I heard the sirens. I watched as a glow of light appeared on the top of the hill where FM 2797 went to town. First, I saw the only bright white glow of the headlights of a car coming from town. I could hear the siren getting louder. Then I saw the red flashes. It was another police car rushing to the scene of the accident. By this time, I was sharing the window with my mother, who was telling me to stay away from the window 5 minutes earlier. As the car got to the bottom of the hill in the entrance of Plaza Drive, I saw that it was a big van. It was an ambulance. This was the first time I'd seen one that wasn't on television. It had lights all over the top of it. It stopped behind my dad's car, and 2 men jumped out of the back with a stretcher that had a pole with a bag on it. They rolled it to my dad's car, and because of all of the lights, I could see everything now. They were pulling a man out of the back seat and laying him on the stretcher. My first thought was that Mr. Laird had been hurt, but then I saw him walk around the other side of the car. I had no idea who was on that stretcher. After just a minute or two, the men rolled the stretcher back to the ambulance and loaded it inside. I remember thinking how neat it was that didn't have to lift it up. They just pushed it into the back and the legs folded up. They crawled in behind the stretcher and shut the doors. The ambulance turned around and started the siren again and headed back into town. After a few more minutes, a tow truck appeared and I got to watch them pull Billy's truck back onto its wheels. Then the man moved the tow truck around to the back of Billy's truck and raised the bed of the truck into the air, and then hooked up some more chains and drove away. Billy's truck looked weird, like it had a big hump in the middle or something. This left my dad and Mr. Laird talking with the police. They were all standing in front of the police car in the rain. The police were taking notes on a little pad that they pulled from their shirt pocket. Then the police both shook my dad's hands, and then Mr. Laird's hand. Everyone got back into their cars. My father dropped Mr. Laird at his house and then came back home. My mom was full of questions and tried to start asking them the moment my dad stepped in the door, but he was covered in blood. She dropped her spatula and asked what happened. Before my dad could even open his mouth, she asked if he was okay. He held up his hands and said that it wasn't his blood, and then glanced over to where I was staring with my mouth hanging open and my eyes as big as a dinner plate. He told my mother to let him take a shower, and then he would tell her everything. She started to protest, but relented after a moment as my dad went to their bedroom to get some clean clothes. My mom finished cooking and had the table set by the time he was out. We were all sitting there waiting when he came and sat with us. He said that Billy's been shot bad, 3 times, once in the leg, once in the shoulder, and once in the stomach. He went on to say that the paramedics said it wasn't life-threatening, but he'd lost a lot of blood and would probably be in the hospital for at least a few days. My dad said the police called his family and that his brother was going to watch his house and take care of his dogs. Then he started telling Mom what happened. He and Mr. Laird went to Billy's house, and when they got there, it was a mess. He said from the way it looked, Margaret had been telling the truth. They called his name and heard him out in the back room. When they went to the bedroom, they knew something was wrong. Billy was sitting in a pool of blood. His right hand was tied to the bed frame with zip ties. His head had a knot the size of a softball just above his forehead. Billy told them that he'd met Molly. That was what he called her a few weeks before at a dance club in Liberty. Liberty is the county seat, just across from the river from the bottom, but we'd have to drive about 20 miles to get there by car. They'd met at a dance hall. They'd been out a few times, and he'd promised to take her someplace nice the next time he was home. Billy did oil field work and made a very good salary, but he drank and partied most of it away each week. She was evidently waiting for him when he got home this afternoon. Billy told my father that he thought it was strange that she was at his house without a car, but invited her inside and had just taken a shower, and was getting dressed when she attacked him. He'd been bent over to get his boots from under the bed, and she hit him with the cast iron frying pan. He said that when he woke up, he'd been dragged to the living room and she was trying to tie his feet together with a belt. He said that he kicked her away and got to his feet but was too dizzy, and she was going crazy. She kept asking him where his money was. She knew he didn't trust banks, and he told her that he always cashed his checks on the way home each Friday. He said that he tried to get to his feet, and she saw that he was still dizzy and came at him again with the frying pan. He was able to fend her off and grabbed her legs and pulled her to the floor when she kicked him in the head. He said that they wrestled around the living room for a minute, and she finally got loose and ran to his bedroom and locked the door. He kept a .22 revolver on his nightstand, and she grabbed that and shot him in the stomach through the closed door. He said he fell, and when she heard him fall, she unlocked the door and came out and held the gun to his head and demanded his money. Billy said he grabbed at the gun and she shot him in the shoulder, and then while they were both fighting for the gun, she shot him in the leg. He got the gun away from her, but before he could do anything, she'd grabbed the frying pan and hit him in the head again. When he awoke again, she was in the bathroom going through the pockets of his dirty jeans. She left the pistol on the bed and he grabbed it and was going to shoot her but missed because he was using his left hand and was still dizzy. He told her that he was going to kill her and started trying to get out of the zip ties. Molly ran out of the bathroom and he kicked at her, but he heard her run down the stairs and then he heard his truck start. He said he tried to get up but got dizzy and fell again, and the next sound he heard was my father calling his name. Margaret, or Molly, disappeared that night. The police questioned my father the next day to weigh his story and Mr. Laird's story to see if they jived with Billy's version of the story. Mr. Laird stopped by a few days later and told my father that one of his friends who was on the police force told him that they'd gone to her place of employment, but nobody knew anything. She had missed her shift for the last 2 days, and nobody knew anything about her. Found a purse in the truck with almost $3,000 in it, and another gun, and some other random items. But they had no clues about who she was, or where she was from. Billy lost his spleen and was off of work for about 3 months. His truck was a loss too. He kept the bullets they pulled out of him in a big orange pill bottle. He even showed them to me once. Sorry if this was too long or anticlimactic. This is a vivid memory for me on several levels. I got to actually see a wreck as it happened that night. Got to see an ambulance in action for the first time. We had a dangerous woman barge into our house and drip blood all over the place. I knew somebody who got shot. I got to see all the scars and bullets. When you are 10 years old, those kinds of things stick with you. Now, who wants to hear about the kid who lived 4 houses down from me? He was the one who shot his neighbor. I even have a newspaper article about that one. Let me know. I recently moved into an apartment close to my workplace in the city. It is a garden-level apartment that faces a parking garage for the city's education department and a patio-like section of foliage, trees, leaves, etc. Connected to this patio is the alleyway. I've been living here for 2 months and the apartment itself is pretty quiet. Most of the tenants are just normal blue-collar folk, grad students, and hipsters, basically. Nothing crazy or weird living here. A needle exchange opened up basically across the alleyway this summer and has attracted unsavory characters. In the US, needle exchanges are extremely controversial and are only allowed in several states. Many of them have been hanging around the back of the alleyway and pooping and peeing out there. The leasing office/landlord of the building is trying to get the city to help with this problem. My first encounter with these peeping druggy toms was one Saturday morning. I awoke to hear all of this moaning and groaning from outside of the patio and tree area. When I opened my eyes and peeped outside, I saw a guy completely high on something, sharpening sticks outside by the window. I was super scared, but I didn't know if he saw me because I quickly hid under my kitchen table and called the non-emergency police. They sent somebody out to investigate like 30 minutes later, and when the cop car appeared, he moaned and walked away from the scene before they even got to the patio area. The second time was me sleeping the night before work. It was the night of my birthday. I heard pounding at around 11 p.m. and awoke to it. I had my window slightly cracked open to let cool air in. I don't have AC. And I heard the sound of rap music coming from either a small speaker or phone. I originally thought the pounding was from a neighbor or upstairs. I then realized that the pounding was coming from the window behind me. It got worse and worse with accompanied moaning and blaring rap music. I called the non-emergency police again, and they told me that they would send somebody out and take a look. This continued for another 15 minutes, and I had to go to the bathroom desperately. I couldn't just sit there and hide in my bed. I crawled to my kitchen, got a knife, and went to the bathroom. I figured the burglar bars on my apartment window would deter the pounding. The pounding stopped when I came out of the bathroom. It got almost too quiet. Something about the vibes, the feeling just didn't feel right. I decided, I don't know why still, to peek through the blind slats and shine my phone flashlight through the blinds. What I saw was the guy's face staring right through me in the blinds. It was horrific. His pupils were completely dilated, like a cat's, almost. He could see me and the knife. He pounded right back at me through the burglar blinds and screamed, "I'm going to kill you, you bitch." I don't want to know what he was on, but he was extremely aggressive and seemed invincible on it. I got scared and was in a ton of shock. I shut the crack while he was continuing to pound and turn up his rap music. I ended up crawling back down to my low-lying bed and calling the police, 911. What ended up happening was the cops came once again about 30 minutes later or so, and when they came, I heard the guy moaning in alarm and saw him bicycling off as I peeked through the blinds on a BMX bicycle. When I talked to the cops, they were more concerned about how he looked than what he did and seemed overall unconcerned and not very reassuring. I ended up missing work, not getting much sleep, and having to spend half the day recuperating during my birthday. My solution now is shutting the blinds tighter and closing the window at night, and trying to use the swamp cooler and fans before nightfall. I'm also thinking about getting curtains to put over the blinds, but overall I feel this is challenging due to the heat and not having AC. I want to stay cool, and the nighttime breeze really helps, but it's tricky because there are druggy creeps outside, it seems. When I told my boss that I wasn't coming into work the following day, he recommended that I seek a room at higher ground. I don't know if that will help and possibly could be more dangerous, since there are no burglar bars on the first floor and above. While my garden level does, and really is what saved my butt from that guy bursting in and wanting to kill me. I am an extremely frightened chick from this experience and have gotten more paranoid since. My boyfriend has been really kind this past weekend. This happened on this Thursday night and offered to stay over more. Since then it's been quiet, but I heard somebody yelling last night outside so loud I could hear it through the shut window. I feel like the cops have not been very helpful and don't take it very seriously. This happened about a year ago. I'm 16 now. He's going to be 20 in August. We met through the internet. It turned out he lived in a city right next to my village. I was 12 then and he was 16. We quickly lost contact. After 2 years, I texted him again, because my friends edited a photo of him and dared me to send it. He seemed nice and we had a lot of shared interests, and talking with him felt pretty natural. I was used to age differences, because for some reason I never met people my age, so I didn't mind it. He took the bus to my village a couple of times and we hit it off pretty well. He even met my best friend. Then I heard he had a Skype call with one of my online friends specifically, that he told her now his last girlfriend supposedly died. My friend felt like he was beginning to crush on her, maybe because she was nice and all too kind. The other friend voiced her worry over him turning her into his ex. She was understandably grossed out. My friends talked with him about it and I asked why he told them but not me. He said I was too immature to understand. I was upset. I was the person who introduced him to my friend group and he was trying to forcefully cut me out of it. My friends had enough and cut him out instead. I didn't. I felt really bad for him. He was an orphan and he lived alone. He had issues with alcohol and he had a lot of trouble with depression even, I think. Losing 3 people could have been devastating, so I kept messaging him, maybe out of pity. But he turned very, very creepy, very fast. Suddenly he called me darling. I was over the moon because I caught feelings. A little puppy crush on somebody I knew I could never date, but who gave me the hope that maybe, just maybe I could. He spent more time with me, sending me pictures and videos of him going on about his day. Nothing unusual. Until one time we called while I was busy playing a game on my laptop. I don't remember what was said exactly, but I remember him being very excited. that 15 is the legal age in Poland. I was excited too. I don't know why. I remember being very, very stiff, even though this was just a harmless phone conversation. The joke was, until February, because I would turn 15 then. He was supposed to visit. I felt like I owed him everything, just because he had issues with his mental health. He told me that his psychiatrist said she had never met someone so young that has still lived through so much. Even though our conversation wasn't about depression at all, I felt so bad for him. That's why I never said anything about things he did that creeped me out or made me feel unsafe, because I was afraid that he would feel worse and do something. He would try to manipulate me about his depression. When he visited, I learned he still had feelings for his supposedly dead ex-girlfriend. He played a song that was their song. Every word in it described their relationship. While we were in my room, he was close to crying, but I had no idea what to do. He put me in this situation, even though he knew I wasn't equipped to deal with it. Once when I was upset, I told him I didn't want to be cheered up. I just didn't. I wanted to be alone. So he sent me tens of texts, pictures, and cheap cheer up LOL things that he found on his phone. It was the one time I set some sort of boundary and he broke it immediately with a "oops, sorry, too late" message following. I had a school trip in October and I had a good time, from what I remember. For some reason, I lost all of my feelings for him then and there. Maybe because for once I didn't force myself to feel bad for him and constantly check if he's online, wants to talk, or if something happened. Maybe because all of my friends thought we were going to date and it was really unnerving that they didn't see anything wrong with it. I cut contact with him later, very slowly. I deleted him off of things he never checks, blocked his number, and then blocked him on Facebook. He noticed, and I never looked back. Later on, through yet another friend, the only one that kept contact with him, I learned that his ex wasn't dead. Or maybe she was. There were screenshots of him talking with the family member about the funeral, then screenshots of him talking about moving in with a girl 2 years older than he was, who was the love of his life, who had the same name as his ex. He sent a picture that was supposed to prove that he was in a psych ward, but even my friend refused to believe him. I don't even know what he was lying about in the end, or if he was lying at all. Next school year, I'll be going to a school in the city he lives in. I know he's still there, so let's not meet, please. I started working at my current summer/part-time job last spring. I am situated in a large old building that used to be a country club but fell into disrepair about 10 years ago. Although there is nothing paranormal about my story, it is maybe worth mentioning that the former manager died in the main office upstairs when they went out of business. It sort of adds to the unsettling quality of this place. Along with that, so do the seemingly never-ending hallways and passages, innumerable hidey holes and half-empty pools, and other strange unused parts of the building, like a secret shower room and sauna, and a tunnel of storage areas that connect the men's and women's bathrooms. There are also a lot of doors to the outside of this place. It makes sense for a country club, but currently we only use one small room for the golf course check-in, the kitchen, and one dining room for the restaurant upstairs, and the small cafe area for early morning golfers to get their coffee and beer. The cafe area is where I work. In the summer, we clock in to open the cafe before 6 a.m., often before the sun comes up. The golf course people come in pretty shortly after, but I would be the first person in the building every morning. I would unlock the front door, disarm the alarm, walk downstairs in the dark, unlock this cage that keeps the drunks at the bar upstairs at night from wandering downstairs, and crawl along a long dark hallway with no windows to get to the light switch at the end of the hall. This always creeps me out, and I end up holding my keys between my fingers like brass knuckles. I'm a woman in my mid-20s, and I've lived in plenty of bad neighborhoods, and ninja sliding down the walls on the opposite side of whatever doorway is coming up, just because it's pitch black and I'm a scaredy cat. By the time I get to the end of the hall and flip the light on, my heart is always pounding out of my chest as I struggle to find the right key to let me in the cafe. The whole situation started when Tim, a golf course employee, mentioned that he kept shutting the door between the men's locker room and bathroom and the storage area that leads to the women's, and every time he would go back in there, it would be open again. This, along with some strange noises, was fodder for the bar regulars upstairs to claim this place was haunted by the old manager and whomever else they say died within these halls. Travis, a co-worker in the cafe, also mentioned that a few minutes after he opened, he went into the men's locker room and noticed that it was steamy and smelled like soap. So he went into the shower room to investigate, and everything was sopping wet and still hot. He was the only person who was supposed to be there at that time of day, but he didn't see anyone, so he let it go. A couple months later, Tim noticed this weird side door that you had to climb up a rickety old staircase to reach, on the side of the building, and it wasn't shutting correctly. He fixed it and it locked correctly, and he didn't think anything more of it. Shortly after, somebody from the golf course came over to tell me that they found someone's entire life packed away in one of their hundreds of lockers that nobody uses, and they thought somebody was living in the storage room between the men's and women's bathrooms. He must have been coming in before the golf course people set the alarms when they left in the evenings, and leaving after the cafe person, me, would come in and turn off the alarm in the morning. And so that means that every morning, as I blindly shuffled my way down that long dark hallway alone, one of those pitch black doorways actually did have somebody hiding behind it. A few days later, a red-faced, angry bald man in Vietnam-era army-issue glasses came into the cafe and started screaming, puffing, and flailing his arms around, yelling about his stuff getting thrown out. He went over to berate the golf course people, so they asked him about the contents of the locker. His answers about specific items led them to realize that this was the man who was secretly living in one of this building's many dark passageways. I never found out much about him, whether he was dangerous or just homeless, but watching him scream about his stuff made it clear that he wasn't 100% rational. I still work there and do a dark shuffle down the hall every morning when I work, and although they say everything is on the up and up with the alarms and the doors locking, it still creeps me the heck out. There have been some other creepy things that have happened in this place recently to make me think that this isn't all over with, which I will post separately if anyone is interested. Edit. The updated post got taken down, so here it is. Monday, I noticed a pad of paper and a long metal pair of tweezers clipped underneath the stair. I thought it probably had something to do with inventory because right before, a manager came in to count the foodstuffs and beverages. Also, it wasn't an area that is easily accessed by customers, but not technically locked in any way during the day. Today, my friend who works at the bar upstairs told me that somebody brought this pad to her, and it has some pretty schizophrenic thoughts in it. It has lots of stuff about how electric cars work to support some kind of government agenda surrounding social media and some plans to patent some sort of alternative energy source that involves the UN and foreign passports. This part of the building is not under video surveillance, so I have no idea who left it and if they were planning on coming back or not, but it could be the same guy from before. He seems pretty unhinged and definitely liked to spend a lot of time in weird parts of this building.